My discoveries led Jacob Bekenstein to suggest that the area of the event horizon actually was the entropy of a black hole. But there was one fatal flaw in Bekenstein's idea. If black holes have an entropy, they ought to have a temperature. And if they have a temperature, they ought to give off radiation. But how could they give off radiation if nothing can escape from a black hole? As it turned out, Bekenstein was basically correct, though in a manner far more surprising than he, or anyone else, had expected.
As he gradually lost the use of his hands, he had to start developing, carefully choosing research projects that could be tackled and solved through geometrical arguments that he could do pictorially in his head. And he developed a very powerful set of tools that nobody else really had. So in some sense, when you lose one set of tools, you may develop other tools, but the new tools are amenable to different kinds of problems than the old tools. And if you're the only master in the world of these new tools, that means certain kinds of problems you can solve and nobody else can.
My work up to 1973 was in general relativity and was summarized in a book I wrote with George Ellis called The Large-Scale Structure of Space-Time. Even then, it was difficult for me to write things down. So I tended to think in pictures and diagrams that I could visualize in my head.
I remember visiting Stephen and Jane at their home in Cambridge. After supper in the evening, when it was time for Stephen to go to bed, Jane insisted, and Stephen acquiesced, I guess this was standard, that Stephen make his way up. I've forgotten whether it was one flight of stairs or two flights of stairs alone, and this was a period when he could no longer walk. The way he got up the stairs was he grabbed hold of the pillars that support the banister and pulled himself up the stairs with the strength of his own arms, dragging himself up from the ground floor on up to the second story in a long, arduous effort. Jane explained that this was an important part of his physical therapy to maintain his coordination and strength as long as possible. At first, it was sort of heart-rending to watch what appeared to be the agony of pulling himself up the stairs until I understood it's just part of life, pulling himself up the stairs like that.
General relativity is what is called a classical theory. It predicts a single definite path for each particle. But according to quantum mechanics, there is an element of chance or uncertainty. A particle does not have just a single path through space and time. Instead, there is an uncertainty principle, according to which both the exact position and velocity of a particle can never be known. I began investigating the effect quantum mechanics might have on particles near a black hole. I found that particles could escape from a black hole, that black holes are not completely black. At first I didn't believe it, but when I redid the calculations, I couldn't get the effect to go away.
I met Martin Rees and he was shaking with excitement. And he said, "Have you heard? Have you heard what Stephen has discovered? Everything is different. Everything is changed."
I was still unsure of my discovery, so I only told a few colleagues. But word soon spread. Roger Penrose phoned up on my birthday. He was very excited and went on so long that my birthday dinner got quite cold. It was a great pity because it was goose, which I'm very fond of.
To me, it's a miracle because it's a complicated and messy calculation. We can now do these things very much better, and it's more transparent what happens. But out of this messy calculation, he showed that black holes aren't black with this quantum mechanical effect. There was a residual radiation. Stephen came to a meeting and people were flabbergasted. I remember someone getting up and saying, "You must be wrong, Stephen. I don't believe a word of it."
I once said that I was unhappy with the explanation given in terms of negative energy particles being created. But I feel this is part of the controversy of science. You must have the give and take. And I'm delighted to be able to be part of that. I mean, that's what makes it fun. You know, if you all sat down and said, "Oh, lovely," when you do have niggling questions in your minds, that's not doing a service to science. But I was not antagonistic to it in any way, except for that one time when I questioned.
I finally convinced myself that black holes radiate when I found a mechanism through which this could happen. According to quantum mechanics, space is filled with virtual particles and antiparticles that are constantly materializing in pairs, separating, coming together again, and annihilating each other. In the presence of a black hole, one member of a pair of virtual particles may fall into the hole, leaving the other member without a partner with which to annihilate. The forsaken particle appears to be radiation emitted by the black hole. And so, black holes are not eternal. They evaporate away at an increasing rate until they vanish in a gigantic explosion. Quantum mechanics has allowed particles and radiation to escape from the ultimate prison, a black hole. Einstein never accepted quantum mechanics because of its element of chance and uncertainty. He said, "God does not play dice." It seems that Einstein was doubly wrong. The quantum effects of black holes suggest that not only does God play dice, he sometimes throws them where they cannot be seen.
He says himself that he wouldn't have got where he is if he hadn't been ill. And I think that's quite possible because it's like Johnson said, you know, knowledge that you're to be hanged in the morning concentrates the mind wonderfully. And he has concentrated on this in a way that I don't think he would have done because he always took a great interest in a lot of things in life. And I don't know that he'd have applied himself quite the same way if he'd been able to get around as he used to. So in a way, no, I can't think anyone's lucky having an illness like that even so. But it's less bad luck for him than it would be for some people, because he can so much live in his head.
When I lived with the Hawking family, I would usually get up around 7:15 or 7:30 and take a shower and then read my Bible some in the morning and pray. And then I would go down at 8:15 to get Stephen up. And then at breakfast, I would often tell him what I'd been reading in the Bible, hoping that, you know, maybe this would eventually have some influence. So then we would go into work and usually we'd go in and see if there were any scientific papers that people send out. And I did discover that despite Hawking's great brilliance, he does read quite slowly. I mean, I could read about twice as fast as he. But of course, the point is he would have to read to remember it because it would be very difficult for him to go back and access the thing. Whereas I could skim the paper rather quickly and say, is there something interesting in this? If I wanted to work on it, I could pick the thing up and look at it.